Welcome to the Case for Movement series, where we're going to be looking at the anatomy that aids movement. Now, we can spend all of our time memorizing the bones and soft tissue structures at any given body area, which is great and important, but what this series seeks to do is look at the anatomy that matters in the context of movement. Now, humans have this inborn ability to move, and not only to move, but to move well. And that's an important distinction and highlighted in an article published by Letters in Science written by Greg Waitry, which states that when it comes to endurance running, humans are among the very top mammals in their athletic prowess. We can understand this statement, at least in part, by looking at our anatomy. And I think it's important that we all look to our anatomy with intention because it tells the story for our capability. And I believe the story this tells is that we're natural born movers, and that's the entire point of this series. So let's get into the case for movement of the feet.
Try to get me in a room, yeah. Everybody wanna talk, why? Always coming with the tunes, They know I'ma take it far, right? Something I already knew, yeah. Never needed your applause, nah. They been saying it's a fluke, this is not a false alarm, nah, it's not. Did it and I never sold my soul, yeah. Devil never gonna hold me close, nah. You could put that on the Holy Ghost.
The anatomy I'd like to cover in the context of movement within the feet is the transverse and longitudinal arch, the tibiotalar joint, and the Achilles tendon. And I want to start at the transverse arch because it's unique in that it helps support the longitudinal arch. Now, let's just remember that there's three arches. There's the transverse, longitudinal, and lateral. And their primary objective is to stiffen the foot to make walking, running more efficient. So, the transverse arch is unique in that researchers are starting to unveil that 40% of the stiffness created by the longitudinal arch is actually derived from the support of the transverse arch. And the transverse arch is actually responsible, and along with the longitudinal arch, for stiffening the foot. Why do we need stiff feet? That's what this is really asking, begging us to ask the question of. And this isn't a perfect analogy, but I want you to imagine you're walking on a beach, right? And this isn't a perfect analogy because there's also like weight displacement. It's not just the stiffness of the feet that makes walking on a beach harder, but notice here as I'm pushing off to my next step, the sand is actually depressing with my foot. The rigidity of my feet becomes less relevant. In other words, the potency of the rigidity that we're creating within our foot is diminished because the ground isn't allowing for that rigidity to be taken advantage of, right? And so with that said, we can still walk on the beach without, the perfectly ideal stiff feet situation, which actually aligns with a similar thing that researchers are starting to look into, have looked into, which, chimpanzees, they don't have an arch. They don't have a longitudinal arch, which almost kind of contradicts this concept we're starting to create that arches are imperative for efficient movement. That's one of the pieces that we're looking at for the Case for Movement series is that the arches, right? And so it's one of the things that I want to focus on being an important part of our identity as movers. So why then do chimpanzees not have a longitudinal arch? Well, they still stiffen their feet through other means. They lock down their muscles within the foot, allowing for a stiff foot so they can still move. And I want to go over basic concept too, which is, the arches of our feet, they're osseous. They're created through osseous means they're created through bones, which is a passive support structure. Whereas the muscular action that chimpanzees have to do, really tightening these feet muscles up, that's an active process, which by nature is not as efficient. So already the arches are showing to be more efficient than another way to stiffen the foot, which is muscular means. So in the beginning of this video, I mentioned that humans are inborn movers, and not only inborn movers, they're excellent movers. And this is one layer of proof here that, this is one of the chapters that is the story of human capability. Humans have a biomechanical advantage for sustained movement because of these arches. And it doesn't stop there. Let's take a look at our Achilles tendon. Now, the Achilles tendon's actually a little bit easier to conceptualize, in my opinion. I want you to imagine a rubber band extending from your heel all the way up to your knee. Now, your Achilles tendon doesn't go this far, but for the sake of this argument, think about it like this. As you dorsiflex your foot, you are going to be lengthening that band, right? And as you lengthen any sort of band, you know how rubber bands work. You stretch them, you release one end, there's a snap. Like, that's the visual representation of what is happening in the Achilles. It's elastic energy that's being stored within that band as you stretch it. The same thing happens when we're walking, right, or running. So we dorsiflex our foot significantly during terminal stance. We also do it, very quickly while we're bouncing on our midfeet while we're running, and we're storing this elastic energy that gives us that snap that you'd see in a rubber band for our walking, for our running. This is just another one of those passive efficiency moments within our ankle that give us kind of an edge when it comes to our movement. I think we can confidently say an edge when we look at, primates. Again, let's take a look at those for a second. So their Achilles tendon is relatively short. For many of the primates, relatively short Achilles tendons, and this doesn't really matter for them because most primates don't have this need for sustained movement like humans do, or at least like humans should, right? And I think I can confidently say like humans should, because we've already started to build this sort of resume, this inventory of structures that are lending themselves to a function of movement. It's pretty well established that structure determines function when we're looking at anatomy, and we've already looked at two in depth that show that humans have these built-in passive efficiency structures, right? And so, we can really beat this to death here, and I will. I'm going to add another one, our tibiotalar joint. And I'll just go over this one briefly. The tibiotalar joint, it's a very strong joint, okay? Which doesn't really matter while we're walking. It needs to hold our body weight, obviously, but research has shown that our tibiotalar joint can hold up to 5, some research even says like 10 times our body weight, but let's just say 5 times our body weight. It can hold the pressure of that, right? And like I said, this doesn't really matter while we're walking, but it certainly matters when we're running. We are significantly increasing the force that the tibiotalar joint needs to withstand while we're running, and it makes sense that this joint would be strong enough to hold these extra forces, right? So what have we talked about, and why does it matter? Well, we've looked at the arches of the feet. We looked at how they help stiffen the midfoot in a way that's passive. It doesn't require extra energy, making us more efficient at stiffening the midfoot to allow us to move forward. We've looked at the Achilles tendon. We have really long Achilles tendons, and this allows for a higher capacity to create elastic energy to give us that snap, that edge when it comes to walking and running. We also looked at the tibiotalar joint, which is capable of withstanding way more force than you'd think we need if we just looked at walking. I think that this one almost is a little bit more impressive because, I don't think we have these adaptive characteristics within our foot and ankle, within our tibiotalar joint, if we weren't required to move more than walking, right? I think now is more important a time than ever to look at, what is our capability as humans, because we have become more sedentary, and there's no way around this. This isn't anyone's fault. It's just the truth, but I think it's a good reminder to look at the anatomy that tells us maybe we're meant for more than just, sitting at a desk job. Maybe we're built for more. And let's look at all of the examples and the evidence that we have to suggest that we are made for more than just this sedentary lifestyle. So the next video, I plan on looking at similar types of structures, but I'm going to march up and look at the knee next. So we'll see you at the knee next time.